Let's go to the reigning Kentucky Derby champion circuit, where Rich Strike made his name last year, Turfway Park, to preview the Battaglia Memorial, which is a Derby prep race this Saturday. Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. And welcome to another graded stakes or listed stakes preview video. And this one is focused on the Kentucky Derby prep race, the Battaglia Memorial, taking place this Saturday at Turfway Park. And I have a very special guest that's going to join me in a second to help me analyze this race and give you picks. And of course, remember last year, sometimes people forget about Turfway Park and the Battaglia and the Jeff Ruby. Well, they all remembered the first Saturday in May because that's when Rich Strike came and shocked the world at 80-1. And where did he run before this? He ran at the Turfway Park circuit. Those synthetic shippers run very, very well at Churchill Downs. So it's an important circuit for you to keep an eye on. But before we get to that, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to follow Trust the Profits. We have so much different content for you, from Derby prep to graded stakes previews to doubling down with Colin Sheehan to the Win Play show, where I'm recapping what happened the week before, capping the card. We have a huge one this weekend for Fountain of Youth. So we have tons of coverage for whatever you're interested in. Additionally, make sure to press that follow button on Twitter to follow me at the handle at Failed to Menace. Make sure to like this video and comment below with who's your pick in the Battaglia Stakes and maybe some other picks that you might like at Turfway Park this Saturday. Well, as I mentioned, we have a very special guest today, and the queen of Turfway Park herself has come. Kaitlin Free is here to join me today. Kaitlin, thank you so very much for coming and talking about Turfway Park. And this is an exciting day, the Battaglia, and talk a little bit about what Turfway has to offer this weekend and some of the trends that you've been seeing there.
Lots going on at Turfway Park, Matthew. As you know, we are the reigning track, as you said, to produce the Kentucky Derby winner. And the three horses that came out of our prep races to run in the Derby last year, I believe all ran in the top 10. I want to say Tis the Bomb was 9th.
Yep.
The name is slipping me. The Brad Cox horse that won the Ohio Derby.
It's on the tip of my tongue, and now I'm blanking too. Yes, we all know which horse it is, though.
Yeah, of course, everybody knows it is, but we forget he ran 5th. And then, of course, Rich Strike won the race. So lots of good things coming out of Turfway Park. There's a lot of contenders kind of emerging on the trail, especially for the fillies. We have some exciting fillies coming up in the Cincinnati Trophy. And the current leader on the Kentucky Oaks front, Wet Paint, actually ran at Turfway as well. Yep. So she's coming out of there. There's a horse from the Gotham that's won 2 races at Turfway. So Turfway kind of really is the place to be for the past couple years, especially in these 2 last Triple Crown trails that have just been so wide open. I'm sure this one won't feel as wide open after this weekend when we kind of have a better picture with these 4 prep races that are going to run. But Turfway's been crazy this year as ever. Of course, you know, we've had a lot of turf track closures. The surface at Churchill has kind of been a little bit shaky. Same with the track at Fairgrounds. Oaklawn doesn't have one. Gulfstream doesn't run on there. It's a lot. Yeah. So really a majority of kind of those mid to high level turf horses don't have anywhere to go this time of the year. So horses for Matt Cassie, Brendan Walsh, Paulo Lobo, all those turf horses are here at Turfway. So running big races, a surface to me, it may just be because there's so many more turf horses here, but it's a surface that's really playing a lot more turfy than I think it ever has. And as far as, you know, trends or biases, really the only thing that I've caught on to is when the weather is warm, you're going to see a lot more horses coming from off the pace. And when it's cold, the track tightens and speed really carries. So the past couple of weeks, it's been anywhere from 70s to mid 50s. So it's been unseasonably warm here in Northern Kentucky. And we've seen speed do virtually nothing. The inside has been totally dead. So the outside and coming from off the pace has really been the place to be. Even though we've had a lot of rain, we had tornadoes the other day, and we're going to have a chance for more this coming weekend, including Friday and Saturday. But really, you know, kind of playing against speed is where you want to go. And we had a massive double carryover into the late pick 5 last Saturday that was over $200,000. I think it was nearly 220. And that final pool closed at 1.4 million. And going into Friday, we have another big carryover. So lots of stuff to look forward to this week at Turfway, and then moving on forward for the remainder of the month, closing out the card on Jeff Ruby Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the horse we couldn't think of, Tawny Port.
Yes, that's
And so that's the horse. After a while, it finally clicked, and I figured it out. But yeah, but yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that about the synthetic and the way in which temperature impacts it, because we see the same thing actually down at Gulf Park, where when it gets unseasonably warm, that synthetic kind of spreads out a little bit, gets a little deeper, and those front running horses, it's running in a little bit deeper surface, and it's not as easy to wire the field. But when it's unseasonably cold in Florida, that's when you absolutely want to be on the lead, because as you said, it tightens up. So that is, I think it's something key to keep in mind for a lot of these synthetic tracks. So oftentimes when we talk about dirt and turf, we think about rain and moisture in the track, but with synthetic, it's more temperature based, I think, than precipitation based. So yeah, very helpful. So let's dive into what I think is a wide open Battaglia Stakes. And this is a 12-horse field. There are 2 additional also eligibles, which if you want to mention, we certainly can. But up here on the graphic, we have all 12 horses. And we see the morning line favorite is the former Bob Baffert trained, now Brendan Walsh trained Gilmore, who is coming off of second place on a synthetic surface out at Golden Gate Park at the El Camino Real. But I feel like beyond Gilmore, and even including Gilmore, this race still feels really wide open with a lot of horses in that mid-price 5-1, 8-1, 15-1 area. Kaitlin, what are kind of some of your initial thoughts, and where's your eye going in this particular race?
I would absolutely agree with your assessment, Matthew. Seems very, very wide open, even with Gilmore in here and some other last out stakes, kind of level winning horses. The also eligibles to me were kind of intriguing. So we'll talk about them a little bit later.
Yeah.
Granted, they get in the race, which I'm not sure that they do. I know the 14, Clear the Air, is going to run in the Gotham. So he was cross-centered. He will run in the Gotham. So he will not get in. But the 13, Ironsides, was the one little bit of interest in, but he's exceeded my expectations. But we'll talk about him in a moment. You already mentioned Gilmore is coming in from the El Camino Real Derby. Ran a second in there. It was a strong second. The numbers and figures have came back very, very well, but there was no doubting that Chase the Chaos was going to win the race. He was second best the whole time to Chase the Chaos. Of course, we're going to see Chase the Chaos in the San Felipe on Saturday as well. But Gilmore, to me, I don't know. He hasn't impressed me that much.
Yeah.
These surfaces from Golden Gate to Turfway, they're different, but they're similar. We see horses win on both of them. And we've seen the El Camino Real Derby winner come to Turfway the past few years, and they haven't won. And some of them have switched barns, coming from California, coming from Baffert, whether it be to somebody else. I believe the one last year came into the Rudy Brisset barn. But first time out for Brendan Walsh, usually not a very good angle. He usually doesn't win first time out with him. This horse wouldn't surprise me if he won. Joe Ramos, definitely a strong rider here, but Joe's been battling some injuries. He had to get off some mounts tonight. Had another injury at the gate. I think he's okay. He told me he was going to catch up with me later after the card, so I'll definitely get back to you on that. But he was just coming off an injury a couple weeks ago. He pinched almost broke his ankle in the starting gate, but
oh gosh,
strong rider. But Gilmore, to me, at that 3-1 morning line, I think is very beatable in this race. But I will say he is tested over a surface like this, and he has ran kind of the distance for this race. So like I said, he wouldn't be for me. He's definitely not in my top 2 or 3. But if he won the race, I wouldn't be shocked, because the Walsh barn has been doing very well here at Turfway. But I also attribute it to Brendan bringing a much larger string of turf horses here this week.
Absolutely. No, and it should be pointed out, these transfers of Baffert horses to other barns have all taken place relatively recently. I will say one kind of positive perhaps for Gilmore is he's actually made it to Turfway and does have an official work over the Turfway Park surface, which I did view as a positive, as opposed to just kind of shipping in blind a little bit.
Absolutely.
But I agree, in a large field at 3-1, that does feel like a little bit of a short price. And I agree, watching that El Camino Real, you're right. There was never really any doubt that Chase the Chaos was going to win that race coming from off the pace. And Gilmore was kind of, in some ways, lucky to get second, kind of coming up the rail that day. So it wouldn't surprise me to obviously see him be defeated. Black Adder was the horse last year that kind of came in. And kind of disappointed a little bit. So if we move beyond the morning line favorite. Where does your eye go? What are some of your thoughts? What are some horses? I know you mentioned the 13 horse a little bit, but what are some of the other horses that maybe intrigue you at a bit more of a price?
Well, the one that I landed on as my top selection was the 8. That is Miranda Rights for Mark Casse, part of a two-pronged attack here for Mark Casse. This one, one thing I really like about him, the 8 Miranda Rights, I really like that he's got a good, solid foundation under him. He's been very, very consistent. He's never finished worse than third. He finished third last out in a top-notch level kind of stakes quality allowance race that was won by Wadsworth. That's going to be a horse that's going to take a lot of play in the Jeff Ruby for Brad Cox. Another runner in here, Scooby Quando, just finished ahead of him. But Miranda Rights had a very troubled trip in there. He got steadied along the first turn. He got cut off along the inside. And the inside's never really been a necessarily awesome place to be at Turfway anyway. So he got squeezed into the first turn, dropped all the way back to last. Never had really opportunity to get rolling. And he just got nosed out there in the end for second by Scooby Quando. But he also was on the wrong lead in the stretch. He was kind of weaving in and out of traffic. So he ran a better third than it looked behind Wadsworth last out, produced his best numbers and figures. In the race before that, he broke the maiden, circled the field, and was very impressive. So he's got tactical speed. He can go the distance. You know, he's proven that because he had so much trouble and was wide in the race going the mile. And he seems to be a horse that's really, really improved, obviously, with the surface switch and the blinkers coming off. So Mark Casse has got a good reputation of upsetting stakes races here. This horse is bred nice. He's bred nice for the dirt, too. Yeah. He's got a good showing on the debut on the dirt. So to me, he has that foundation that it takes to win a prep race. He's got the form over the surface. He's bred well. So that was the one that I landed on top, but also the horse that was second in that race, Scooby Quando, for the Ben Colebrook barn. They've been really high on that horse for a long time. And Ben Colebrook usually doesn't win at first asking. They nominated this horse to a stakes race on debut, the Turfway Preview, as a 3-year-old going 6.5 furlongs in. It wasn't the toughest group in there, but he won on debut, won a stakes race for the Ben Colebrook barn. That just absolutely blew me away. And then for him to finish second behind Wadsworth for the first time over 2 turns and the first time against some really good horses. He was really restless in the gate and he was coming wide. Son of Uncle Mo, we know those are dangerous anywhere. So this horse is really, really talented. So I took him in Miranda Rights because I thought that race last out was much better than any of the stakes races coming in with the presence of Wadsworth and with the adversity the two had to overcome. And I will tell you, if this horse wins this race against this group, won a stakes race on debut, and then wins this Derby prep race, people are going to have to take him really seriously leading up to the Kentucky Derby because this horse has a lot of talent, but I'm just kind of skeptical with not having raced it too and not having a foundation under him.
Yep. Well, it's funny. You and I see this one very similarly. We both identified, I think, a key race initially. My top pick is Scooby Quando. I love that race. I went back and watched it, breaking from the far outside 10 post, being caught wide. And again, a horse that you mentioned, it wins the stakes race in debut and then comes back and backs it up going 2 turns with a really professional effort, I thought. And I like horses like this. I know they're young. I know there's not that kind of back class and foundation to them, but I just think that you're getting a nice price at 6-1 on the morning line. Miranda Rights as well, 8-1 on the morning line. I think both of these horses make a lot of sense here. Now, even though we might be on the same 2 horses, I feel like there's a couple of other horses we should at least mention. Brad Cox, a big name, obviously, in Kentucky, always wins and always does well at every track, but Turfway Park in particular has 2 horses in this race, Aristocracy as well as American Speed. Do you like either of those in any capacity? Maybe do you prefer one over the other? Interested, because I'm sure those horses are going to take on some money, even though they're 6-1 and 8-1 on the morning line.
I would say so. These ones were a little tough for me because Brad Cox has been so dominant so far on this road to the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oaks. These 2, if I'm being totally honest with you, didn't interest me as much. American Speed ran second behind Fantastic again in the Leonidas Stakes, which Fantastic again is probably going to be the favorite in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. He ended up skipping this prep. This horse, American Speed, was impressive breaking the maiden at Indiana, but he's a horse to me with breaking the maiden at Indiana as a 2-year-old. That's kind of indicative to me that the horse needs Lasix. Because you don't send a 2-year-old up to Indiana unless you're going to run them on Lasix. So that's kind of been my moving piece with this horse. So he isn't getting Lasix, which he's already ran in a stakes race last out. He didn't get Lasix, but he was about to be headed and just held off of another horse that I'm potentially interested in here in Ironsides. And I mean, other than, I would say I definitely prefer American Speed because of that last out race against Fantastic Again, who I think is a very, very good 3-year-old. Really, the maiden breaker, the Aristocracy came out of on New Year's Day, really hasn't produced much. It was an allowance race. Really hasn't produced much coming out of it. He was in for a high tag on debut for Brad Cox. It was a maiden 150,000, which that's
right.
to sneeze at. But I mean, still, Brad was willing to be able to part with him on that debut race for the right price. So that even though he is 2 for 2, he's got to win on the dirt, he's got to win on the synthetic, which is, good versatility. It just doesn't seem like he's the one that Brad is looking at in here. He's not Triple Crown nominated. So I would heavily lean towards American Speed, but I still can poke some holes in American Speed and kind of makes him not one of the top contenders in my opinion. But that being said, it is Brad Cox. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll also mention is another horse that I'm sure is going to attract some interest, which is the number 10 Bromley, because of where he ran last time out, running in that grade 3 Lecomte. Obviously winning in a pretty impressive fashion in a $50,000 optional claimer over the turf or over the synthetic, I should say, at Turfway Park. I still don't know if I love this horse. I mean, breaking from the far outside, I think this horse might not want 2 turns and might not want the distance. 5-1 feels like a little too short of a price for me in this particular spot. But again, name recognition. I'm sure some people who are just kind of tuning into this race might not follow Turfway too much, might see that horse and go, oh, I remember that horse from another race and might kind of go to it. I would say the same thing's true about Congruent. Interesting horse in the far outside who last time out ran against Candidate and Major Dude in a big time race down at Gulfstream Park. Again, I just don't know. This horse is kind of, I don't love the switch. Asanio does not win at a very high percentage when switching surfaces. I think only about a 6% rate. And I don't know, this horse seems like he's regressing a little bit the last few times out. Now maybe it's stepping up in class, but that turf to synthetic move doesn't seem to be a winning one for that barn. So kind of taking a pass on 2 bigger names potentially, even if their prices are a little bit nicer. But listen, you've teased it a couple of times. He's not up on the screen, but talk about your boy Ironsides in 13 hole. If he draws into this race, you mentioned that he's been impressing you. He was in a maiden 30 not that long ago and comes back and runs some really good races.
Yeah, he loves the surface and he's really blossomed under Declan Cannon. He's got one decent race at Churchill where he finished a distant second behind a horse on the dirt, but that was going a mile and a 16th. This horse wants 2 turns. And yes, he did break his maiden 2 back in a maiden 30, but he was just so much in control in that race. He should have never even been in there. He was just stupid the best in there. And then comes back in the Leonidas behind Fantastic Again at a big price. And I know this horse broke the maiden in a maiden 30, but he impressed me so much. The race was fast. The numbers came back pretty big for the level. So I was like, I'm going to give this horse a look in here at a little bit of a price. He ran amazing. He just got nosed out for second behind American Speed, and he's done everything right. And he's a horse, once again, he does have that foundation underneath of him. He's done nothing wrong here at Turfway, and his numbers and figures definitely match up. He's a small, scrappy type of a horse that he's going to go where his jockey wants him to go. He's kind of the one that he'll fill into gaps. He'll go wherever he wants you to go. So I think he's a horse that he's going to be a monster price. He's 20-1 on the morning line. I think you'll get at least 30-1 out of him. If he does draw into this race, I think he'll be fine from the outside post. He's one that I think is definitely potentially a must-use underneath, whether it be for 3rd and 4th, because I think he's going to run his race again, and he keeps getting more and more interesting around those 2 turns. He's not ran a bad race yet around 2 turns.
That's so important that you point out, in terms of how he handles the 2 turns, but also the fact that he clearly took to Declan in some way. And that is something I always pay attention to, particularly for younger horses, when a jockey just seems to figure out a horse sometimes, or just kind of knows the right style, knows how to calm the horse down. I mean, we just saw this last weekend with a horse like Confidence Game, who was super worked up in the paddock, and James Graham did a great job at just calming him down once he got on the track, showing a new element of him in terms of rating, and he did a great job at kind of keeping him wide so it didn't have to face too much kickback and things like that. So I always pay attention when you see that all of a sudden, wait a second, there's an improvement. Yes, they're going 2 turns, but now there's also this jockey change, something that I think is always important to keep in mind. And you mentioned he's going to be a big price.
Yep.
And I feel like if he draws in is kind of a must use in vertical exotics because like you said, he's an honest horse. He's going to run his race.
Absolutely. And he's done nothing but improve from race to race to race, no matter the surface. But I think Declan has really figured him out over the surface. He's really improved around 2 turns. He's, I think he's really bred well for the surface and the tight 2 turns. He's by midshipman out of an Animal Kingdom mare. So that's synthetic all day long, but it's also nice for 2 turns. He does have a little bit of that tactical speed. I just think he's an interesting horse. I'd be really shocked if he won, but I know he's definitely going to run his race. And I think it's absolutely good enough to finish in the money. And he would be one that I would be more likely to use underneath versus, American Speed, Aristocracy, Bromley, somebody like that, because the price is going to be much better and the form is there against these level of horses over the surface.
Well, Kaitlin, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope, the folks watching, we gave you some big prices. We gave you some thoughts. It's always good. At least I always feel better when somebody as smart as Kaitlin agrees with some of my thoughts as well. So it's good. Scooby Quando and Miranda Rights were on your radar as well. Your top 2, my top 2. So maybe that gives you a sense of where to go in the Battaglia. But Kaitlin, thank you again, and let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find you on the racetrack.
Well, thanks, but you can always find me on Twitter at Kaitlin E. Free. I'll be on there, talking about CDI tracks. You can always find me, whether it be Turfway, Churchill Downs, and any place CDI in between. You can always find me there, and I'm always tweeting out whether just be American racing, pedigree, lots of international racing. There's definitely going to be some big interest from me. There's a road to the Kentucky Derby European Prep coming up on Friday, and then we have some Japanese horses that are going to be interesting in the UAE Derby coming up as well. So not only domestic preps here in the United States, but everything else in between.
Absolutely. You're one of my go-to people for international racing. And I'm absolutely going to have you back to talk about that UAE Derby.
Absolutely.
Because some of those runners a lot better than I do. So I look forward to having a conversation with you about that. So Kaitlin, thank you again. And thank you again for watching this video. Make sure to press that like button and let us know who you like in the Battaglia Stakes. Well, friends, until next time, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.